Once upon a time, there lived a king who had 7 daughters. All of his daughters were married, except for his youngest daughter, who was usually called Nantampuk Emas. The king loved his daughter very much, especially Nantampuk Emas, and the king tried to get his younger daughter to marry a handsome prince. It was a custom for Pakpak people at that time to file their teeth. Every girl who enters adolescence was required to file their teeth to make them look prettier. The teeth were filled with hardwood, which was usually called baja tonggal. Baja tonggal wood was a very rare type of wood. The wood grew in the middle of wilderness. It took a lot of struggle and preparation to get the wood. When Nantampuk Emas was a teenager, the king ordered his youngest daughter to find a baja tonggal tree in the forest. Together with her 6 older sisters, Nantampuk Emas went to the forest to look for the wood. They walked hand in hand when entering a dense wilderness area. The farther they walked, the thicker the forest became. The sun's light was getting dimmer because it was covered by the thick leaves of a large tree. For some reasons, Nantampuk Emas was the last to walk. Separated from the group, she started to panic and tried to find her sisters. In her search, she came to a hill. Many large trees grew there. One of them was a baja tonggal tree. Seeing that tree, Nantampuk Emas was very happy. She immediately cut down the tree after the tree was felled and cut into small pieces so that it could be easily transported. Nantampuk Emas returned home. However, she did not know the way home. It was getting late and she was very panicked because she did not know how to get out of the dense forest. Later, that she prayed for direction to God so she could return home. When Nantampuk Emas focused on praying, suddenly a giant monkey appeared in front of her. Nantampuk Emas was very scared. Her legs were shaking, and she was so shocked when she saw the hairy creature the size of an adult man standing in front of her. But the giant ape turned out to be very kind and helped Nantampuk Emas carry a baja tonggal stick and made a sign for Nantampuk Emas to follow him. Nantampuk Emas hesitated a bit, but she followed the giant ape's steps. The giant ape took Nantampuk Emas somewhere. Apparently, it is where the giant ape lived. Nantampuk Emas followed the giant monkey to his residence. Then she thought it would be better for her to stay in the hut for one night and had plans the next day to leave the hut and returned to her father's palace. The next day, when she was about to go home, she did not know the way to go back to the palace. Finally, she decided to stay in the giant ape's hut. Nantampuk Emas called the giant ape Tagandera. Tagandera was very kind to her. He understood Nantampuk Emas' words as if he were a human and also fulfilled all of her needs. Nantampuk Emas did not feel lonely in the middle of the forest because of Tagandera's kindness. After 1 year living in the forest, Nantampuk Emas was eager to return to her father's palace. She asked Tagandera to guide her back to the palace. Tagandera agreed. They walked to the palace through the dense forest, down the valley, up the hill, and crossed the river. After walking for several days, they arrived at the edge of the village. His Majesty Nantampok Emas's father was overjoyed to see the youngest child he loved came home safely. Nantampok Emas recounted her experience to her father and told him that it was Tagandera who was credited with saving her. Because of that, Nantampok Emas asked her father to allow Tagandera to stay in the palace. Her father agreed to Nantampok Emas's request. At that time Tagandera lived in the palace, Tagandera was taught how to live like a human. However, because he was an ape, his basic nature was still there. He often climbed palace pillars, jumps around, and his behavior disturbed other palace residents. One day, Tagandera was found lying in a chicken coop behind the palace. His body was stiff, motionless, while his eyes were still open. Seeing this, Nantampok Emas was saddened to see Tagandera lying and covered in blood. Nantampok Emas tried to treat Tagandera for 7 days and 7 nights, and she continued to pray with all her heart. On the 7th day, Tagandera's weak body began to move. Then he opened his eyes and looked around the room. Gradually, Tagandera began to walk, although he is still struggling a lot. One day, suddenly an old woman came to Nantampok Emas's room and she suggested that Tagandera should bathe in a 7-stream river so that he would be completely healed. Of course, they obeyed that old woman's advice and they carried it out. The next morning, Tagandera left for the river. Arriving at the river, he soaked for a while, then slowly he felt his body getting healthy and fit. After a long soak, he came out of the river and suddenly, how shocked he was when he found the hair that covered his body had fallen out of the river. It turned out that behind the hair appeared smooth skin just like human skin. Apparently, Tagandera turned into a handsome man. Nantampok Emas was surprised to see the figure standing in front of her, a tall, handsome man. Tagandera has turned into a human. After the incident was known by His Majesty the King, father of Nantampok Emas, immediately Nantampok Emas ordered her maid to hold a wedding ceremony between Nantampok Emas and Tagandera. Finally, Nantampok Emas lived happily ever after with Tagandera.